Можемо розпочинати.
We can start. Some more journalists might join us presently, and we are also waiting for the director of the Government Office for the Coordination of European and Euro-Atlantic Integration, Ms. Stefanishyna, but she would hopefully join us later. My name is Sergiy Sydorenko. I'm an editor-in-chief of Европейская Pravda news outlet. We have here my colleagues, the editors, and in case you do not see the writings on the plaques at the tables, let me introduce our other guests. Mr. Mingarelli, the ambassador of the European Union here in Ukraine. Ms. Maronkova, who is the director of the Nato Information and Documentation Center in Ukraine. These are our keynote guests, and the reason why we call them keynote guests is because we are discussing the reforms in Ukraine. We would like to share today the information about our research and also hear from our guests what do they expect from the new Verkhovna Rada, the new composition after the parliamentary elections, and what should we pay more attention to as the representatives of civil society, as the media representatives. So these are the questions that we would, the answers to which we would like to hear from you. And now let me introduce our experts, Ms. Zarembo, and she is the associate analyst of the New Europe Center, and also Mr. Panchenko, editor of the European Pravda. These are not all of our guests. Some people from Dixie Group, which is an expert center that deals with the power supplies and energy issues, they were going to join us. The Center Nova Europa, and Ms. Natalia Andrusevich also participated in our work with its ecological component. The idea of our research emerged during the last presidential elections when we made a fairly small research studying or exploring how the relations between Ukraine and the Western countries were seen by the candidates, presidential candidates. And we sent out the questionnaires to all the candidates. And the information we received from them helped us out a great deal to understand. Therefore, even now, for better understanding of our current president, the new president's understanding of these relations. After that, we decided to make a larger research involving all major political parties. We sent an 8-page questionnaire to the leading 6 parties that were leading in the pre-election ratings. 5 of them agreed to reply. We are grateful to them. We understand that before the elections, all of them were busy. And one party didn't reply. It was the opposition party, Опозиційна платформа за життя. But their position is quite well known. They are basically in favor of reviewing the process of European integration of Ukraine. The institutional support of European integration, the other aspects, environmental aspects, not the least. All these components, all these aspects were included into our research, of which we are going to inform you about the particulars of which we are going to inform you right now. And the good news that I would like to emphasize, all of the 5 parties that gave the answers to our questionnaires, they we can say, proclaimed themselves or stated their willingness to continue the European integration process, even if it involved unpopular reforms, that which gives us hope that even in the next Verkhovna Rada there will be the proponents of this process. So let us discuss now the institutional integration, the NATO, and the other components of the research. So if we speak about the institutional, let us call it, coordination of European integration of Ukraine, we might speak about the intentions of all the 5 parties that replied to our questionnaire to keep the position of the Vice Prime Minister for European integration. And some of them even went as far as stating that the Prime Minister should be put in charge of coordination of this process. Therefore, we all understand that it is important to have a specific official in charge of this process, and it's very heartwarming. It was very heartwarming for us to know that all major political parties were in favor of that. But the political parties have different vision of the integration process and also of the functions of the Office for European Integration, the director of which was going to join us today. And maybe even such an office could be given a status of some governmental, fully fledged governmental agency, part of the government. So let me turn the floor over now to Ms. Zarembo and ask her what's the progress, or what progress has been made in the process of Ukraine's rapprochement with NATO. Well, I would like, first of all, to thank Europejska Pravda for their participation in the collation of this information, because all the replies that were sent by the parties to us, they were structured so, or rather arranged so, that we couldn't see initially which parties sent which replies. There were parties number 1, 2, 3, and so on. Which I hope contributed to the objectivity of our analysis. Therefore, we can start discussing their replies, starting with their quality. I'd say, and as Sergiy has already mentioned, the most, so to say, in-depth, most expertly done were the replies of 2 parties, Sila and Chest, and Sluga Narodu. Sila and Chest, the reason why they gave relatively high-quality replies, well-prepared replies, was that they have a lot of people who were in the security services in Ukraine previously doing some types of analysis. Therefore, they were quite well-prepared to cover this information. Speaking about Sluga Narodu, the current president's party, we can say that their level of expertise inside the party grew probably during that period of time when they were actively preparing for the elections.
Ця партія навіть не знала про
As we know, or as it emerged, they did not even know before the elections that there was the office of coordinator of the European integration, and they only learned about that in the course of the election campaign. We now can also analyze the recent appointments made by the new newly elected president, and as we know, the president's authority covers a number of key positions in the government, and some of the appointees were the people in the defense ministry whom we positively view because of their previous experience and expertise. what about the security service? If we discuss the appointments in the security service, we can say, we can point out some divergences between the declarations and the practical work of this organization. According to the information that is publicly accessible, well, for example, the President mentioned that the security service was supposed to deal more closely, to get involved more closely with, struggle, this fight against smuggling, against contraband. But in practice, we have not yet seen any achievements. Speaking about the annual action program that is a national reflection of the membership or partnership membership plan of NATO, we can say that two parties, Batkivshchina and Golos, in their replies, for example, specifically pointed out the importance of this aspect of Ukraine's cooperation with Western powers, Ukraine's cooperation with NATO. Given the level of expertise that the specialists of those parties have, we can say that some other parties probably might have just underestimated the importance of certain aspects of which they were asked, or about which they were asked in that questionnaire. But and I'm ready now to answer your questions. Let us now discuss commerce and economic issues. Well, we can start by saying that the relations between the European Union and Ukraine are not probably at their peak today, because Ukraine introduced a number of restraints on exportation of, for example, the timber from Ukraine into the country members of the European Union, and that decision enjoyed very strong support in the Verkhovna Rada, in the parliament. But we also know that there were a number of opposing views but the draft laws were not even put to discussion by the Speaker of the Parliament because of very high level of politicization of this issue. And the question now for us is what would be the position of the other political parties that will be elected into the parliament? What would be their position vis-a-vis European Union in this commerce and trade realm? Batkivshchina party, for example, had a unified position, insisting that timber and all other raw materials could only be exported from Ukraine after they undergo at least some processing here. It should not be raw materials as such that are exported, but some sort of either semi-processed or, already end product, so to say. Our experts, by the way, do not say that, for example, the timber cutting here in Ukraine is any different from this process in any other European country. But some of the parties emphasize the environmental aspect of that issue. Sydorenko party provided the most radical so to say, reply. They insisted, or they put forward rather, the idea of a total ban on exportation of all timber from Ukraine. But the experts doubt the possibilities of the execution of this plan if it is ever introduced or enacted by the parliament. But some of them say that if Ukraine continue exporting or the exports of timber, soon it will have to buy timber from the other countries. But On the bright side of that, we can say that all major parties express themselves to be in favor of developing cooperation between Ukraine and the European Union. One more question, so to say, a trap from our side. There was a question about counterfeit products. We asked the parties if they were ready to increase punishments and penalties for importing or production of counterfeit goods and products here in Ukraine. And it's not only about the counterfeiting, it's also about the intellectual property rights. And we were very glad to hear from all the political parties that they were all staunchly opposed to any abuses of intellectual property rights and counterfeit products. Also, the designated geographical names and their intellectual rights protection. For example, if we speak about champagne, cognac, very well-known, generic names of very well-known drinks and products, some of the Ukrainian producers were manufacturing their own products with these names, and we asked the political parties what would be their position in the future with regard to this issue. We can say, and the major political parties acknowledge that all major Ukrainian food producers, food manufacturers were already in the transition process. They were changing these names to which the foreign businesses in foreign countries objected, pointing to their not justified use of these brand names. And we can now invite Ms. Veronika Movchan, who is the representative of the Institute of Analysis for Political and Economic Problems. Well, having the experience of the lengthy debates of the bill that was called Buy Ukrainian and has not yet been enacted into an act, we can say that if we compare that situation with the replies of the major political parties, we can point out some progress. Many parties indicated that they were willing to protect national producers, national manufacturers, but at the same time they were disposed, were willing to consider, different options in this realm. It can give some grounds for further consideration in terms of the continuation of reforms and implementation of this free trade area between Ukraine and the European Union, especially if we speak about fiscal consolidation. But in the areas where Ukraine could be a role model for the other countries, we do not like to have any regress, so to say. We at least can see some of the commitments that Ukraine has already undertaken, and we hope that with the new parliament these commitments will be implemented. The necessary conventions with regard to the transit of cargo, what was termed as in the industrial visa-free regime. The important thing is that political parties and the new government make all these commitments happen. Because there has been a number of very good, well-developed strategies that regrettably have never been implemented so far. Thank you. Thank you, dear colleagues. Summarizing this, so to say, financial and economic part of this discussion, we can say that indeed today we are the witnesses of a very, strong commitment of all major political parties in Ukraine. Another issue that inevitably, emerges when we discuss the problems of economic relations between Ukraine and all the rest of the world is this issue of the land market in Ukraine. Ukrainian parliament's position is well known, but some of the political parties, they propose some exceptions, for example, out of this total ban on the sales of the land. Those who are in favor of that say that the exceptions should be done. For example, the representatives of the Russian Federation, the economic entities from the Russian Federation, should be prohibited from buying land in Ukraine. And so these are all declarations so far, but at least the fact that the parties stay their positions is positive. We have not been trying to rate, so to say, the parties, make any ratings on the parties' approaches to the process of European integration. We can say that in different areas, different parties could be named leaders. For example, in the environmental protection issues, we can say that all major parties practically stated the positions that coincide with all major commitments that Ukraine has undertaken, including its documents with bilateral documents with the European Union. Although we have some problems in the area of Euro-Atlantic, what is called Euro-Atlantic integration. And here we can mention all political parties. What is of particular concern to me is that a lot of promises has been made by many politicians, which is frankly quite typical of all politicians, but many of those promises have never been implemented. The Parliamentary Committee on European integration in the Parliament was supposed to be, for example, supported by the political party Sluga Narodu. Later on, one of its prominent representatives, Mr. Razumkov, published an article saying that the parliament, that parliamentary committee was not needed. And in my view, it's just the lack of understanding of these issues on the part of Mr. Razumkov. Some of the parties, some of the leaders of some of the parties have a quite extensive political background, but still some of them do not have, so to say, comprehensive understanding of the whole, so to say, array of issues related to the European integration. So probably a great deal of work should be done, explanatory work or awareness raising of awareness work. Therefore, at this note, I would like to turn the floor over to our guests, or the representatives of the European Union and NATO. My question to you would be to assess the progress that has been done in the development of relations, and also what are the challenges, what are the issues that need to be, addressed. Mr. Mingarelli, the floor is yours.
And we very much appreciate the survey conducted by European Pravda on the political parties' commitments toward the EU. And it's clear that 9 days before the parliamentary election, it's the right moment to discuss this kind of issues and try to better understand the plans and vision of each political party when it comes to Ukraine-EU integration. My first point is that we should always start from the fact that over the last 5 years, a lot of positive things have been done to get Ukraine closer to the EU. There is no doubt about that. The previous leadership has shown a clear determination to implement our association agreement and our deep and comprehensive free trade agreement. The Cabinet of Ministers adopted a government action plan to implement this agreement. Then the Verovna Rada and the government adopted a joint roadmap setting clear priorities for both bodies. And it's clear that this shows that the political will to implement this agreement and therefore to get Ukraine closer to the EU was there. And the results are there as well. I will not give you too many figures, not to bore you, but in terms of economic integration, as I continue repeating, 4 years ago, 25% of Ukrainian exports were going to EU markets, 25. Last year, 42% of Ukrainian exports went to EU markets. So there is, without any doubt, an economic integration underway. Bon. And it's clear as well that the many reforms which were undertaken over the last 3 to 4 years in areas such as decentralization, public administration reform, health, education, pension reforms, cleaning gap of the banking sector, all these reforms have brought Ukraine closer to the EU. And again, I have really no doubt about that. And we hope that the new leadership will build on what has been achieved up to now, rather than consider that they have to start from scratch. They don't have to start from scratch, because what has been done over the last 3 to 4 years is really impressive and is a good basis to move ahead in the implementation of our agreements and in getting Ukraine closer to the EU. Bon. Alors now, regarding the priorities for the next few months, we all know that in the area of the rule of law, a lot has still to be done. We hope that the new anti-corruption court will be operational at the beginning of September and will get the necessary means and resources to work effectively. We hope as well that some anti-corruption bodies such as NAPC and SAPO will be one way or another rebooted so that they are more effective in their work, because up to now they have been doing not everything one could expect from them. We hope as well that the provision on illicit enrichment will be reincorporated in the relevant texts, and we hope that there will be a reform of the police, security services and prosecutor general office as recommended by the report which were drawn up by NATO, the US and the EU. So in this area of rule of law, we should really focus on these things, and I believe that it is in the interest of Ukraine to move ahead. Then obviously we have the energy sector, where we know that it is important to have an independent and competent energy regulator. We know as well that the reform of the gas sector has been stalled for some reasons, and therefore the unbundling of Naftogaz is now an urgent necessity. If Ukraine wants to remain a gas transit country and be able to negotiate by the end of this year a new gas transit contract with Russia, we are ready, obviously, to play a role in this, and you know that the European Commission has been a facilitator of the dialogue between Ukraine and Russia, but for the time being, it's clear that we have not been able to make a lot of progress. The political will is not there on the Russian side, but on the Ukrainian side, a number of prerequisites have not yet been met, and therefore, in the gas sector, once again, it is necessary to do more. Then, you have mentioned, Sergiy, land reform. We know that this is an area where there is a huge potential for Ukraine, and therefore the necessary legislation has to be adopted to pave the way for an effective land reform, which will trigger, obviously, an impressive development without any doubt of both agriculture and agro-processing in this country. And we hope as well that it will be possible to continue and speed up the reform of corporate governance of state-owned companies and the privatization of large-scale companies. Two areas where, over the last few years, very little progress have been made. We really hope that it will be possible to do more in this area. Finally, we know that a new electoral code was approved yesterday. This is good news. This will be implemented as from 2023 and not before. But we really believe that it is important to implement this reform as quickly as possible so that the election, which are already free and fair in this country, but can really be organized along Western standard as soon as possible. In order not to be too long, I will stop here, but there are a few other areas where we are ready. I did not mention transport, deregulation, but it's clear that in our views, these 3 to 5 areas are the priority ones.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. So Barbora Maronkova, head of NATO Information Documentation Center, what would you see as top priorities in terms of Euro-Atlantic integration of Ukraine?
Yeah, thank you very much, Sergiy. Good afternoon to everybody. And first of all, thank you very much both to Europejska Pravda and New Europe Center and other experts for this very interesting, let's call it research. Especially less than a week before the elections, just as the ambassador said, for us also this is a very interesting piece of information. And obviously we are very, very, very excited and pleased that majority of the political parties are supporting continued Ukrainian Euro-Atlantic path towards integration with NATO. And this also nicely fits with the recent results from, I believe, yesterday or 2 days ago on the opinion polls, which were carried out, in which also both EU and NATO integration and future of Ukraine in these two institutions was positively supported by majority of Ukrainian citizens. So, of course, for us as NATO, this is also very good news. I'm not going to share any secrets with this audience, knowing that the relationship with NATO has been up and down, and overall public support for NATO in this country has had a lot of variables over the past 20-25 years. So overall, I think this gives us a good insight into the mentality shift and mentality mood in this country compared to maybe 8, 10, 15 years ago in regards to Euro-Atlantic integration. Just as the ambassador, I would also underline that in the past 5 years, again on different levels, starting from the top political leadership, also civil society, NGOs, journalists, experts, everybody has worked very hard to move Ukraine closer to NATO, including making the changes in the constitution, all the way to improving a lot of our toolboxes, such as the annual national program, creating new initiatives, for example, a NATO-Ukraine joint working group on defense technical cooperation and defense reform, all the way to almost daily request for briefings and information sharing that we receive across Ukraine. Where do we currently stand? Politically, NATO continues to support equivocally Ukraine in its territorial integrity, sovereignty, and non-recognition policy of illegal, illegitimate annexation of Crimea. We continue the highest level political dialogue, just as with the previous president. We had the new president, Mr. Zelensky, visiting on the 4th of June, where not only did he meet bilaterally with our Secretary General, but we also held a NATO-Ukraine Commission, which means that the president had the chance to meet and address all the 29, actually 30 representatives of our member states and one soon-to-be member state. And this continues, in which, as you could see, I believe yesterday in the news, we are expecting the visit of the NATO Secretary General and the whole North Atlantic Council to Ukraine towards the end of October. When it comes to the lower level of our work and engagement, also on the practical level, the work is ongoing. NATO representation to Ukraine and its advisors continue to engage on a daily basis with its counterparts at the different areas, and we continue pushing for some of the important reforms that we think are important and crucial for Ukraine if it wishes to pursue the Euro-Atlantic integration ambitions. You asked me about the priorities. Well, actually, I have a whole list of them here. It depends how much time you have. But I think I will start, since we are discussing political parties and possible members of the new Rada. I would probably then focus on the work which needs to be done by the parliamentarians and by the Rada, rather than necessarily very technical details on the defense reform and security sector reform, which, as you can imagine, are also our important priorities. But when it comes to legislative work, we were very pleased with our support, also the United States and the EU colleagues and the EU advisory mission. Ukraine adopted the new law on national security, which was adopted last year, but we still have a whole pack of laws which are interconnected with this, which are still sitting in Rada, and they really need to be passed. I'll put it very bluntly, because otherwise we cannot move ahead with the reforms. This is the law on security service of Ukraine that Ambassador mentioned. So as you can see, this is our joint effort together with the United States. The new Parliamentary Oversight Committee over the security sector and intelligence services. So that's yet another committee that needs to be created along with some others that the EU has concerns about. Law on intelligence, law on management of state secrets and classified information, reform of defense industry and the procurement, including a law on state defense order. And I can go on down the list, but these are the key 5 laws that we consider as essential in order to unlock a lot of the other underlying reforms which are necessary both for defense and security sector reforms. So as we continue to underline, always together with our allies, we acknowledge at NATO aspirations of Ukraine, but we have a lot of work ahead of us. We achieved a lot, but we need to continue. And NATO representation in Ukraine continues to stand ready with our advisors to support this effort with the new Rada, with the new government, and other partners we have worked with before, and I'm happy to work in the future. Last sentence on this, I would just stress, as you are all aware, we do have a lot of instruments at our toolbox, Ukraine and NATO. We have been partners since 1994. Ukraine, NATO has a distinctive partnership since 1997. So we have over 20 years of experience working together. And this means we have a whole package of things that we developed. Comprehensive assistance package, which is the overarching package, which allows us to really work in all different areas with our trust funds, with building integrity, professional development program, etc., etc. We have the annual national program, which allows us jointly to help and assist and check the progress of the reforms. We have the planning and review process, which is more specifically defense related, and I'm not going to go into details, and many other working groups, roadmaps, etc., etc. So we have a lot of tools. We need to focus on using them to the best potential so we can assist you at your path. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Перед тим, як ми перейдемо до запитань із залу,
Before having Q&A session, I would like to say that we implemented due to support of the European Union and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic, and we thank them for support of our program. I would like to give the floor to Olga Stefanishyna. I hope that she read all three our reports and will be able to tell us her opinion on this. Do you think I read it? Do you believe it? Yes, I believe in it. Yes, I believe it too. Yes, I read them all. So before going, so I will be brief because there is no sense of repeating. After the revolution of dignity, we spoke a lot that this is also the win of the civil society. Independent civil society emerged, and there was big request on European and Euro-Atlantic transformations. And I believe that this is a discussion when civil society not only file requests but also proposes agenda. And I believe that this is a big thing, and we should note it. We do not only speak about political dialogue at the political level between civil society, media, and diplomats. Today, we face the situation where civil society proposes ready-made decisions or proposes trends about the priority of the next parliament. And for me, it is interesting to hear what diplomats say, and we all speak one language, and I believe that the next parliament and the next government will be in better conditions than current or previous governments, because there is macroeconomic stability, and also there is an agenda, and Parliament knows what laws need to be approved, and the majority of draft laws were developed. They should be approved. There are agenda of the ministries and the reports that were published by European Pravda in the last 2 weeks. This is the good base for coalition agreement, and it means that each party today, I would like to remind to you, and Sergiy told me about it, these were 3 pages. No, 8 pages. You've said 3. No, 8 pages. 8 pages of questions, and each party, they are now experts in European and European integration agenda. So they read all these questions, and there were options. So I read your report, and I am optimistic about plans of the future political forces, and I was pleased to note that many of future people's deputies, they tried to understand what is going on. The only thing of concern, and I would like to focus on this is the last report on trade policy and trade obstacles. I read all the answers, and I can say that I do not see potential for change in rhetorics concerning this in Parliament. So I have my opinion, and I believe that in trade, the government should lead in this policy concerning trade. And some political parties provided more emotions than concrete and professional approach. And those solutions that were provided by the forces, they are mainly in the competence of the government. That's why I would like to focus on this. There are some things where the government should lead the agenda. And I would like to thank once again European Pravda, and I believe this is not the last initiative, in order to support this discussion up to date. And I would like to remind you that this is, we are government office, and we prepare our own report that will support the analysis that was published. Thank you very much. So.
Well, thank you, and we will continue cooperating with the government. Colleagues, if any of you have any questions, you are welcome. My name is Leonid Homekov. I'm a freelance system analyst.
Do you agree that European Union must offer to get the citizenship to Ukrainians whose sons and husbands were killed or wounded while standing by for Europe? As you see, it's about the social aspect of the integration, not just non-visa, but now citizenship, as I see it. Thank you.
I have no clear answer to give you, because it is a competence of our member states, and this is an issue which today is not on our agenda. But it may be worth reflecting on this issue. But once again, this is not something we have never discussed in any of our meetings with the Ukrainian leadership.
Thank you. Катерина хотіла ще зауважити.
Так, буквально одну ремарку.
Just one remark about my impression of the questionnaires of that survey or research. It was also related, in my view, to the ability of the parties to provide answers, or rather to draft, to give the drafting of those answers to the experts. For example, if we speak about European integration, I am not an expert. For example, I may not consider myself an expert on all aspects. Therefore, in some of those answers, we should not treat these answers as 100% all-round, replies to our issues that exclude any other views of those political parties on these same issues. Let me add that this survey has not been, and this research has not been over. We have, and we invited, in fact, the parties to contribute further to these answers that they have provided so far. The key idea for us was not to show that one party is better, the other party is worse in terms of European integration. It was for us to better understand and maybe to feed them some ideas, some better understanding of the importance of Ukraine's cooperation with European institutions. And there's going to be no wonder if they come up with some new ideas, some new contributions, adding to their answers to this survey, as it has already been answered by them. Certainly, I would also like to emphasize that it was not at all our idea to cause any harm, to injure, so to say, any of those political parties or their images. We just have, I think, as a result of our survey, the understanding, the vision of the political parties of a number of very important topics, some of which, and the reforms in which, have been so far quite unpopular. It's quite important for us to understand that. I represent Razumkov Political Analysis Center. I'd say that this research has been instrumental in clarifying position of many political parties, because in foreign policy areas, their positions, foreign policy area, these positions were not quite clear. My second issue is that whether you have after this survey any are you convinced that the office of European integration will be preserved in the government? So is there going to be any, so to say, heritage, and will that institutional heritage be preserved? Well, my answer would be that if you look at the recent government documents, I'm afraid I might be confused, but I think it was the Ministry of Finance, that decree that covered not only the trade with the EU countries, but it revised the export duties in the external commerce of Ukraine. It didn't cover only the European Union countries, but all countries with into whom Ukraine exports its products. Well, I'd say that these conflicting views of the EU and Ukraine on some commercial issues, we consider them important. We wanted to have better understanding of the views of the political parties, but we certainly didn't include all these positions, and we only included the most important issues there. Well, I might say, as a representative of the government, that I have nothing to add on, for example, on the specific issue of scrap metal exports from Ukraine. That was also under, was a matter of contention. For me, as a representative of the government office in charge of European integration, it was very interesting to look through this survey, to read it, and I'd say that as far as our office is concerned, we have not yet seen any statements by major political parties, official statements declaring the intention to abolish our office. And the members of my team and I personally, we are 100% disposed to continue working to maintain our institutional capacity, and regardless of the, so to say, juridical, legal form of this structure, how it's going to be arranged in bylaws, in different statutes, I think it's not important. The important thing is that these changes should not affect the various important aspects of the integration of Ukraine, integrational processes. This work has already been organized so that it's going to be implemented, whatever the bureaucratic arrangements or rearrangements are. We understand that there could be some organizational changes, like changes of format, of status of our work, but we are going to, even if somebody will try to make us, abandon our work, we are not going to, we are going to continue working. And we have prepared, so to say, a transition book, a set of issues, a small brochure that would include the most important information about the challenges, about the progress that has already been achieved, and what are potential breakthroughs for the nearest future in our relations with the European Commission and European Union. So our approach is in favor of gradual movement and progress. I see no major risks to the process. And let me emphasize that in today's EU-Ukraine summit declaration, all the Ukrainian wishes on the development of sectoral integration were implemented. We started discussing what was called as industrial visa-free regime, and Mr. Ambassador knows that it was very important for us, and I hope that this level, even at the level of cooperation, will be preserved, even at the level of political institutions. I do not have a question, it's just a brief comment. Let me thank Mr. Ambassador and Ms. Director. Let me thank in your presence everybody who has contributed to this work or to this research. As a former Ukrainian ambassador to Croatia, let me state it once again that we are ready to continue cooperating with the European Union, and our party is convinced, and I personally am convinced that and all the members of our party and its leaders are convinced that it's instrumental for Ukraine to continue cooperating with the EU, and for the office of the governmental office in the government of Ukraine is also and should be kept instrumental in this work, as well as the work of all other Ukrainian government's agencies and bodies. They should continue their work. Thank you once again for your work, for your cooperation. Thank you. In turn, I would like to thank you, and as a great deal of very serious work has been done by political parties, certainly being aware that some of the aspects of our work could be criticized, but Mark Young was one of my counterparts in the preparatory work, and let me thank Batьківщина party as one of the parties that agreed to, so to say, even bring to or bring about the larger level of commitments, so to say, indicate larger level of commitments, even after that survey was already printed. As I can see, there are no more questions, so thank you, dear colleagues, thank you all our viewers and listeners who were following us online, thank you all the members of the media.